How are you doing? My name is Matthew, and I'm pumped to talk to you guys tonight about something that's on my heart, about how we deal with our life in troubling situations. And we're going to talk about perspective tonight. This message is entitled Perspective. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pray, and then we're going to get right to the message. God, thank you that you're a good God who brings us through a lot of stuff, God. A lot of us have stories that were meant to take us down, to make us feel like failures. God, we have a lot of stories of people who hurt us, situations that have happened to us that that could have destroyed us, God, but we are still here standing today. And even though if we don't know that your grace was behind it, God, I know, and I pray that you would show each and every one of us that it was your grace that has caused us to be here, to be alive, and still have hope in our situations, in our day-to-day. So God, I pray that you would open up the eyes and ears of those that are here tonight, God. Let them be able to receive this message. God, I pray that you would anoint my words, Holy Spirit. I pray that you would anoint this time together, and that you would make it a powerful time as we talk about you, and as we talk about our purpose, and we talk about the kingdom in which you brought forth. In Jesus' name. All right. So like I said, this message is entitled Perspective. And what I realize is that all of us go through some pretty crazy times in our life. And admittedly, high school is a crazy time. If there's ever a time that things are going to go really wrong and pretty terrible, it's during this time, right? This is sometimes you don't even know who you are. Sometimes you're one way with some people and another way with a different group of friends. And you see that in your own friends, and maybe you don't even know your friends are going to be friends from one day or the next. But it is a hard time to be where you guys are at, and especially now. I remember high school. High school was not fun for me, man. I did not enjoy high school. I couldn't wait to get out, because most of the people that I was friends with were not nice people. And so I was waiting to get to a new season of my life where I can actually have friendships with people that were meaningful. And a lot of people that I had friendships with that were meaningful were, of course, in youth group. And so that's one of the reasons why I think the youth group is so important. But one of the things is, as we go through our lives and we encounter different obstacles and we fail and we feel like we're not measuring up and we're comparing ourselves to other people, sometimes we take on this mentality that I'm a failure, I'm a loser, I'm no good. And I think if we understood God's perspective over our situations, that we would have an incredible hope in Him, and that we would have this purpose to continue going through our lives, even though we might feel pretty crummy from day to day. So I'm going to give you, just for fun, a little quiz on different perspectives. Do we have any video gamers in the room? Okay, we have some people who play video games. I'm going to give you a little quiz. You tell me if what perspective this is. You know, there's different perspective of the camera, where the camera is situated in the video game. You tell me what perspective this is. Okay, I'm going to give you an easy one. All right. So what perspective is this? It is first person perspective. You got it. It is first person. Excellent job. Okay, here's another one. It's a little bit harder. This one's an over the shoulder sort of thing. You're playing the girl, Laura Croft. What perspective is this? Does anyone know? Third perspective. All right. Third person perspective. Pretty good. All right. Here's the last one. The hardest of them all. You guys know what it's called? Not as sure, are you? It's called a bird's eye view, or if you're super geeky and nerdy like me, it's called isometric. It's an isometric kind of semi-3D, looking up and down at a sort of like a 45, sometimes at a 75-degree angle. So imagine if you were playing these games, and instead of using the perspective that the designer gave you, you decided to do another one. So say if you wanted to play this game, Clash of Clans, in a first-person shooter, in a first-person mode, perspective, how do you think you'd do in this game? Not very well, do you, right? And so when we are facing different challenges and struggles in our life, I'll tell you right now, our culture doesn't set us up for battling and doing well in the struggles that we have in life, and oftentimes we fall. So, for example, back in the late 1950s, early 1960s, there's something that happened with advertisements. Some group of researchers came in and they said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to start advertising to the young people. Because the young people, they're going to buy more, they're going to have this consumer habit all throughout their lives, we're going to make more money. And so they didn't think anything of it. They just kind of, you think they're going to make more money, going to make more revenue, going to make the stocks go up. And so they started targeting young people, and all of a sudden, in this weird quirk of fate, celebration of being youthful was unprecedented. It was never like that ever in human history. And all of a sudden, it became desirable and fashionable to be young and stupid. And that's what people wanted to be. And then fast forward to our digital age, where computers and the internet, Wi-Fi rule everywhere we go. We're so used to getting things instantly, right? We want success in 17 levels. We want success in a year. We want success. We want to lose fat in a couple of weeks. And we're used to this instantaneous gratification that our culture admits to us. And even worse, we look at people, youngsters on the internet, on YouTube, on TV, and we see a group of young people that are amazing at what they do, amazing singers, amazing piano players, amazing leaders, all at a very young age. And we get caught up in a bunch of things. We think that we need to achieve something very early on in our lives. And if we don't achieve that something, if we're not somebody, if we're not acknowledged, if we're not that person, then we feel like we've failed. My dream in life was to be a famous actor, famous musician, someone famous, someone who was in the entertainment business, and would go around and people would know who I was. And at a young age, I got into a theater company, a professional theater company. And right in the middle of that theater company, I hit puberty and I couldn't sing anymore. Not only that, I came in and I thought I was the ish. I thought that I was the coolest guy in the room, and pretty soon I had no talent, I had no confidence, and I had no friends. And all of a sudden I realized, you know what? This whole dream of being famous, I'm not going to achieve it. I'm no one. I've already failed at something that I've tried to do. Why even go on? And I was so close of killing myself during that summer that that it was kind of scary. But Jesus did something real cool. He spoke prophetically into my life, saving me from killing myself. And there's a big story that goes with that as well, which some of you know. But essentially, that's what happened to me. I saw that I wanted to be somebody. I wanted to succeed and be famous. But when I failed, I thought that I was no one. And this is what happens to us, right? When we're comparing ourselves on social media, and we are looking at how successful other people are, and then you look at yourself, you think, man, I'm a failure. I'm a loser. I'm not doing this right. I don't have enough friends. Maybe I'm worth it. I'm not worth it. Maybe I'm just worthless. And we see that we set up unrealistic expectations in our lives, and we won't meet them. And so we have this sense of failure, and we identify ourselves with our failures instead of what God has intended us to be. And we identify ourselves by the bad things that we experience instead of the good things that are to come that God has for you. And so I want to tell you a quick story about Leonardo da Vinci. Okay, you guys know who he is? Leonardo da Vinci is the guy who most famously painted the Mona Lisa, the most celebrated painting of all time. And this guy is considered to be a genius. The things that he would paint and the things that he would do were enormous and ambitious, and there wasn't anyone quite like him at the time, even to this day. And Leonardo da Vinci, he was actually really good when he was young. When he was 14, he already had an apprenticeship, so he was already pretty good. But something happened in his life where he took on projects, and what would happen is he wouldn't finish those projects. In fact, he was in Florence this one time doing this magnificent mural, and time got away on him, and it was too ambitious, and he didn't complete it on time. So not only did he not get paid for that piece, but also he got blacklisted in Florence, and so he couldn't get any job anywhere in Florence. So the only thing he was able to do was to draw pictures of dead criminals. Back in the day, there was a lot of treason, a lot of executions, and as they documented people who died, if you could draw, you would document this person who is dead and write a description of what they were wearing at the time. This is the only thing Leonardo da Vinci could do. And guess how old he was at this point? 30. He was 30 years old. Okay? So then this is what happens. He goes over to Milan, and he figured, okay, maybe the grass is greener on the other side. And he goes there, he gets a couple of contracts that don't really work out too well. And then he gets this really cool contract about making this massive bronze horse, this brass horse. And it's so large that he invents a new plastering system in order to make it. And he goes completely all out. And in the middle of this project, Milan goes to war, and they figure they need brass cannons more than they need a big old sculpture. And they took all this material from him. All of that work completely wasted. And so for us, our perspective, imagine you in that time, if we had this perspective, this such a close perspective of what's happening in our life, we would define ourselves by that failure, wouldn't we? We wouldn't have the wherewithal to continue. We figured, we tried and we failed, why bother? But see, Leonardo da Vinci did something that was incredible. Throughout the years, he continued to draw, he continued to paint, he continued to research and look at cadavers and see how people's hands move. And he continued to do this year in, year out, until finally he was contracted to do the Last Supper, of course, of Jesus. And he got his lucky break at the young age of 46 years old. There was a 16-year period where all he was doing was work. He was just drawing. No one knew about him. He was a loser. But yet, he continued to do it, and he got a big break, 46 years old. How many of you would be willing to wait 46 years of your life in order to be recognized for what you're doing, or to find your purpose in life? And see, sometimes with our culture, we're not ready to accept this, right? We want it right now, but really God says that great leaders, your purpose in life sometimes comes later on. And so, there's all throughout the Old Testament and the New Testament, there are stories of these sorts of things happening. And I call it these experiences in the wilderness. Right? Moses, you guys know who Moses is? He was the guy who led the people out of Israel out of slavery, or Israel people out of Egypt out of slavery. And he was exiled from Egypt for 40 years. And all he did was, he was a shepherd. That's all he did. For 40 years. But God was working on him. God wasn't finished with him yet. And then King David comes along, and he's running around in the wilderness because the king wants to kill him. He's doing this for years, but God is not finished with him yet. And you guys right now are in high school, and you feel like you're going through this wilderness. Right? You feel like, I don't know if I'm going to survive from day to day. I don't know who my friends are. I don't know who I am. I'm one way with one group, another with another group. I don't see God working on my character. I don't see God doing all these things. But you know what? God isn't finished with you yet. You're in the wilderness, and even though you don't see the fruit of your lives, You don't see the fruit of what you're going through. God is producing something in you that is going to be greater than what you're going through. It's going to be greater than the sufferings that you're going through, because He's ultimately bringing it to a place where you can step into the purpose of who you are in the kingdom of God. Even Jesus had this happen to Him too. Jesus was 30 years old when He started His public ministry. 30! Okay? And not only, He didn't do anything. He was a carpenter. He just made tables and chairs. And He's from Galilee. Okay? Galilee is like the Transcona of Jerusalem. Okay? Of Israel. It's like, what good comes from Transcona? Okay? Like, seriously, honestly, do you know anyone good coming from Transcona? Neither do I, right? So Jesus is from this backwater place of Israel, but yet He comes in at age 30 and ends up changing the whole world. And even on the day that He died, His followers were seeing Him on that cross. And to the whole world, it looked like He was failing. It all looked like that the world defeated Jesus, and that in the very midst of the failure, Jesus knew something that we didn't know. The disciples didn't know He was going to raise up again in 3 days. The disciples didn't know that. If we were there, if we were the disciples, we were just so focused on that day, we would have no hope. But Jesus rose again on the third day. The very thing that looked like His failure was the thing that brought Him victory and brought us in this pathway to have a living relationship with the Almighty God. And so, when you guys are in the midst of your wilderness, know that God may be letting you go through suffering and trial and hardship, but God is producing something in you that is going to create victory over your life. So this is what we got to do, guys. We have to embrace the journey. This whole idea that we need to have success right away, listen, guys, it's not going to happen to us. It's going to happen to such a fraction amount. God doesn't work that way. God is saying, you're on a journey with me. And sometimes it's going to be tough, but it's going to be worth it. Embrace the journey. The second thing we need to do is we need to stop comparing ourselves to other people. Who cares if this girl is prettier than you? Who cares if this guy has more confidence than you? Who cares if this person has more friends than you? Who cares if this person has more likes than you on Facebook, Instagram, or whatever? Who cares? It does not mean that your value is diminished. It does not mean that God isn't producing something in your heart. It does not mean that He is going to bring victory over your circumstances if you just let Him and to allow the journey to come into completion. The third thing is we need to learn from our failures, not define ourselves by them. When we fail, we think that we are worthless worms, and we don't realize that it's in the very failures, just like Jesus who died on the cross, just like Moses who was in the wilderness, who was exiled, just like King David who was in the wilderness being hunted down, seeming like the failure meant it labeled him, actually brought victory. Some of you guys are in the wilderness today, and you need to hear this because of this very thing. The world is searching and groaning for people of God to step into their purpose. You know, in Batman, they have that bat signal in the air that says, hey, we need you, Batman, we need you. There's the same thing that the world does for Christians. And you know what it looks like? It looks like in the papers when some student, some teenager kills himself or herself. It looks like when bars are shot up for no good reason. It looks like the staggering statistics